Hey guys, my name is Michael Richmond. I'm a politician in Australia at the moment, currently running as an independent candidate for the electorate of Wentworth here in New South Wales. Recently, a very infamous man known as Andrew Tate posted his political party known as BRUV running for the UK in the next election. Now, as we have here, I have a list of all of his policies, or well, some of his policies that he wants to implement if he gets into the UK. If you don't know who Andrew Tate is, he's pretty much a ex-professional kickboxer who became a millionaire in the webcam industry, and now he simply posts a bunch of content online and has a huge following. And it seems like his following is so big now that he wants to get into politics. So let's go through some of his policies and see if they're actually good or not. So starting with number one, harsh migration control. Now, I don't know a huge amount about the UK, but it seems like migration seems to be a big issue, or immigration seems to be a big issue with a lot of European countries, the US, the UK, and even here in Australia. Now, having harsh migration control, I don't think is too good. If you've seen recently in Poland, they introduced kill on sight to any illegal immigrants that step foot into their country, which I think is a bit excessive. But you should definitely have some really good migration control policies in place so that you don't just have an influx of immigration into your country without the proper infrastructure. So I'm going to put harsh migration control in. I'd say it's a good policy. It's definitely something that you should have, and if you don't have any migration policies, it can really have negative impacts on your country. Now, number two is 24/7 solitary confinement live stream of knife crime offenders. I'm just going to put this in meh. You don't really need a 24/7 live stream of a knife crime offender. You should really just have strict policies in place so that a knife crime offender doesn't even have a knife in the first place, or doesn't have a weapon, or that other civilians in the area should actually have a means to defend themselves. So I don't think this is a really good policy, and to be honest, this could be a policy that just drains a lot of resources in the UK if you're monitoring so many knife crime offenders. I think there was around 50,000 stabbings last year in the UK, which is just insane. Imagine having 50,000 knife crime offenders on 24/7 live stream. That's a lot of people you need to employ to monitor these people, a lot of technology, and you have to make sure that you're following them all around. To me, it seems like a lot of resources. Number three is a complete teardown and restructuring of the BBC. I don't know about a complete teardown and restructuring, but all sorts of news outlets have a bias towards them. Like Skynet News here in Australia is a more right-leaning news source, while the ABC is a more left-leaning news source. I personally don't feel very strongly for any news sources, so I'm going to put this in meh. The news is definitely a very great way of receiving a lot of misinformation and lies, so that's why I think places like Twitter and even TikTok, as much as I don't like TikTok, are much better places for journalism to occur, much realer places for journalism to occur, especially on YouTube. There are some great journalists on YouTube who work independently, and they release some great stories. Number four is all LGBTQ material banned from public schools. I actually think this is quite a good policy. I think indoctrination of kids is not a great thing. The LGBT can be quite enforcing on younger individuals, and LGBTQ stuff should be more of a adulthood kind of thing. Same as tattoos, same as alcohol and drugs, stuff like transgenderism. It's quite a big decision to make, especially on your body, changing body parts. It should be done as an adult, not done as a kid when you're still innocent and you don't really have your brain fully developed. So banning all LGBTQ material, I think, would be a good policy for public schools. Now, the next one is capping non-British residents as 10% of the population. Again, I don't know a huge amount about the UK, but it seems like they're having a huge influx of immigration at the moment. And when you just have so much immigration occurring in such a short amount of time, it can be really detrimental to infrastructure in the UK and obviously living standards. 10% though is quite a small percentage. Now, something like this wouldn't be able to happen in Australia, as Australia is more of a immigration kind of country. It's been happening since the 1850s. ever since the gold rush. Non-Australian population is currently at 30%, 35%, but I think having a cap on that would be great, maybe 50%. So I'm going to put this policy as a good policy. He's trying to mitigate the damage done to infrastructure. Because if you can imagine, if you have such a large amount of people coming into your country, where are they going to live? Where are they going to get their food? How are they going to be dealt with in terms of healthcare and education? Schools are going to be flooded. Health is going to be flooded. You're going to need more nurses, more doctors, more teachers, more farmers, more food. It puts a lot of strain on the country, especially smaller countries like the UK who don't have as much land. So the next one, promoting entrepreneurship in schools. I think I'm going to put this in meh. Oh, it's kind of in between good and meh, but I'll keep it in meh. Entrepreneurship is really great as it encourages individuals to take risks, but if everybody became an entrepreneur, then I don't think our society would really function that well. We need plumbers, we need electricians, we need teachers. There are a lot of people who are essential to our society, and if everybody was an entrepreneur, then our society wouldn't function. But I definitely think there should be different kind of classes in school. There should be classes that teach students about finance, like proper finance, how tax works in your country, how money works in your country, where finance and money all began, the gold system, the fiat system, where we are today, how banks work, stuff like that. Because stuff like that isn't taught in schools, and I really think it should be. Next one, reducing foreign aid to zero and improving infrastructure at home. I'm going to put this in meh. Now, there definitely is a limit to how much money. As you can see, my country, Australia, and the UK and the US have given so much money to Ukraine, and I personally think that money would be better spent improving the infrastructure of our country and their countries. But you shouldn't set foreign aid to zero. In Australia, we don't really have many neighboring countries. We've got New Zealand, and we've got Papua New Guinea and the Asian countries above, but we're not really bordering any countries. So we don't really have to worry about foreign aid. But if you're a country like Poland or Bulgaria, you're next to a bunch of countries. And it's really important to build good relations with the countries next to you so that you can improve trade. As we're becoming a more globalized society, it's definitely important to have more allies than enemies, let's say. And improving infrastructure at home, spot on. You want to build more hospitals, build more schools, improving living standard and raising the floor as best you can. They're great stuff to do. Prioritizing NHS for British taxpayers first. I'm going to put this as yes. If you're British, then you should definitely get your British healthcare in place. If you're prioritizing the non-British citizens in a British country, seems a bit silly to me. So that sounds really, really good. Enforcing mandatory member, this is just great. If your politicians aren't rocking up to their only job, then I think you might need to rethink who you're electing in your country, okay? Every politician should be going to every speech and every meeting so that they know what's happening. Especially in Australia, where we have something called electorates. A politician is elected to look after a certain area. And if your politician isn't rocking up to their meetings, then it seems like they don't really care about their electorate, which is not great. Immediate deportation for any crime by a non-citizen, no matter how small, with zero appeal. I think this is a meh policy. If somebody makes a small mistake and they get instantly deported with no chance or capability of getting back into the country, it can definitely cause some issues and create enemies with foreign countries. But I definitely think there should be stricter rules on immigrants who are not actually Australian or British citizens. So that's why it's not in red. I would say more deport criminals who create major crimes with chances of appeal, but low chances of appeal. Next one is a new simplified tax code. Good policy. I think the UK has a ridiculous tax code, the same as the US. I don't know why they're unable to create tax codes that benefit the individuals rather than go against them. Here in Australia, we've got a really simple tax code, which makes it really, really easy to get your tax done. You know, you hop into the Australian Taxation Office website. It literally has your entire tax form ready. You click generate, it generates everything. It tells you exactly how much tax return that you're going to get or that you have to pay, and then you click submit. It's really simple. I think a lot of other countries should get onto the bandwagon there. Next one, bring boxing and wrestling back to schools. I would personally say this is a policy you shouldn't implement. I can understand why Andrew Tate would say this. Boxing and wrestling builds up men. It creates stronger men. Unfortunately, it does cause a lot of damage, brain damage, permanent body damage, which I don't think is great. I think every school should promote sport to create fit individuals, but boxing and wrestling, I think that's more of a per school basis. Next one, create a licensed and armed society. Again, this is not something that I would implement. Here in Australia, there was a massacre that occurred in Tasmania in Port Arthur, killing over 30 people. So John Howard, who was the Prime Minister at the time, just pretty much removed all guns from Australia, which I think was one of the best decisions that Australia has ever made, and that really separates us from the US. And as you can see in Australia, we have extremely low attacks on individuals, low stabbings, low deaths from other individuals. Barely nobody shoots up a school in Australia because it's really, really difficult to get weapons and guns. Now, that doesn't mean people can't get knives like what happens in the UK, but I just think there should be more education and training of individuals on how they can defend themselves better. But you shouldn't arm a society. As you can see in the US, everybody has a gun, which isn't great. Yes, you can defend yourself with your own weapon, but that also means that the person you're against also has a gun. If nobody had a gun, then nobody can cause lethal instant damage or harm to each other in less than a heartbeat, which is not great. Next one. National Bitcoin Reserve. If you know me, you know exactly where this one's going. This is a great policy. Bitcoin is the new land, I like to say. Countries that aren't buying up Bitcoin is not a great decision. I think every country should be buying up Bitcoin. It should be like gold or oil. It should be something that every country buys up, and the price will just naturally grow, and GDP for that country will grow as well. So yeah, buy Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is incredible. Next one, nuclear power independence. I'm a bit on the fence with nuclear. I think nuclear is really great, but a country that's run entirely by nuclear is extremely expensive and will cost the citizens a lot. So I'm in Australia, I'm promoting more of a 50% nuclear, 30% solar cut with 20% fossil fuels, but entirely nuclear is very, very difficult. I'm actually going to move this to meh policies because it's too difficult to implement. And for the UK, I don't think British citizens want to pay an arm and a leg for their electricity bills, especially with food costing more, cost of living going up, houses costing more, everything's just difficult. The last thing they need is their electricity bills to skyrocket because of net zero. Next, preventative health. Good policy. Good policy. I'm a firm believer in preventative health. One of my policies is actually to incorporate nutritionists and personal trainers into Medicare to promote preventative health. So if all citizens can improve their health and improve their food and improve their sleep, I'm a firm believer that number one, this will improve people's mental health so they can think clearly and they'll actually be a more productive citizen. And number two, improve their lifespan and also their health span, so they're spending less money for treatments that they would otherwise have had to buy if they weren't doing preventative health. So this would actually reduce the burden on public health systems that we could spend the money towards better things like hospitals and schools, let's say. Next one, voting on the blockchain. Yeah. I'm surprised this hasn't been done yet. The blockchain is incredibly powerful. If you don't understand how the blockchain works, it is pretty confusing. I would recommend going to YouTube and looking up a video on it. I'm guessing that the blockchain will be popping up more and more in government systems and private company systems to prevent corruption and prevent bias. Not really bias, but yeah, preventing corruption. If you looked at the 2018 election, Trump firmly believed that... the 2021 election, 2022 election against Biden, he firmly believed that the elections were rigged and that caused a lot of legal disputes and wasted a lot of time. If the voting was done on the blockchain, Trump could have nothing to say and then Biden could get straight to work. Next one, creating a ministry of the future. I don't know, it's more of a meh policy, ministry of the future. You just keep building more ministries. The more ministries you have, the more issues occur. If you look at what Elon Musk is doing with the Department of Government Efficiency, he's trying to delete all these different departments because they have overlapping rules and they obviously cost a bunch of money. I think a ministry of the future is something that all politicians should just have. They should be thinking about the future, thinking about their kids, thinking about their grandkids, and setting their country and their citizens up for success, rather than trying to hoard as much money as they can and live a good life for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. Next one, and last one actually, working with the US and not with UN/NATO. I think meh. It seems like people are slowly moving away from the US. The US is the current federal reserve of the world. Their currency is used by a lot of countries, but countries like Brazil, Russia, South Africa, India, the BRICS, they're trying to move away from the US dollar and use stuff more like gold. More and more countries will be moving towards that in the future, because the power that the US has from being the global world currency is enormous, and I don't think one country should have that much power. As for NATO, I think NATO is pretty good. They work together to make sure that Europe can't end up like World War I or World War II again. And the UN, I think, is good as well. I think it's pretty good. So, Mr. Tate. Mr. Tate actually has some good policies. He is clearly very for Bitcoin and the blockchain. He wants to help individuals in the UK with tax. He wants to make it safer. He wants to make their politicians do more work, which is great. But it doesn't mean all of his policies are good. He clearly has some hatred towards the BBC, the news. He thinks his citizens are getting indoctrinated, which there's some truth to that. But completely tearing down the BBC is going to be very costly. 24/7 solitary confinement for knife crime, again, very costly. Nuclear power, very costly. I don't think he's quite understood just how much money it will take to do these things, and not working with the UN/NATO, which literally provide him defense and security in the country, which is really important. But then he also wants to bring boxing and wrestling to schools and give everybody weapons, which personally I'm not a huge fan of as an Australian citizen. Well, that's pretty much everything. If you agree with what I've said, that's great. If you disagree with anything I've said, let me know in the comments below. I'm going to respond to every person's comments. If you want to learn more about my policies and what I'm doing to make Australia better, check out all my policies and my events at michaelrichmond.com.au/policies and /events. And I'll see all of you guys in the next episode or the next video. Take care.